me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to the cross where thou hast died. Draw me nearer, 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 blessed Lord, to thy precious bleeding. There are depths of love that I cannot know till I cross the narrow sea. There are heights of joy that I may not reach till I rest in peace with thee. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to the cross where thou hast died. Draw me nearer, 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 blessed Lord, to thy precious bleeding Son.
Let's pray. Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy great and holy name. Father, we're so thankful for this opportunity we have to come and study your word. Pray that everything we do this day is in accordance with thy will. Father, we're also mindful at this time of the ones that we know are sick and suffering, and we ask that you would be with them, be with Rain's family in their time of sorrow. Father, we're also mindful of our country, and we'd ask that you would be with our leaders and give them the strength and guidance to look to thee for some direction. Father, we're also mindful of our military men and women and the sacrifices they make so that we may have these freedoms. We'd ask that you would be with them. Father, we're most thankful for Jesus who came, lived a perfect life, gave us the example on the cross of his death, burial, and resurrection, that we might have hope of eternal life. Father, keep us in your care always. Forgive us of our sins. In Christ's name, amen.
If you have one of the sheets from last Wednesday night, from Kings 10, basically I'm just going to pick up with Kings 11, 2 Kings 11, and flip over on the back and just go through some questions. Apparently I'm going to rewrite them and reread them as I hand them out tonight, because some people in the family can't read my writing, although it's perfectly clear to me at times. 2 Kings chapter 11, starting with verse 1, and there's 21 verses here. If someone wants to start us out, read a couple before I pray. Read the whole chapter together and go back and discuss it as our questions are.
When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose, and destroyed all the seed of oil. But Jehoshabeth, the daughter of King Joram, the sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons which were slain. And they hid him, even him and his nurse, in the bedchamber of Athaliah, so that he was not slain. He was with her hid in the house of the Lord 6 years. And Athaliah did reign over the land. And the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and fetched the rulers over hundreds, with captains and guards, and brought them into the house of the covenant with them, and took an oath of them in the house of the Lord, and shewed them the king's son. He commanded them, saying, This is the thing that ye shall do. A third part of you that entered in on the Sabbath shall even be keepers of the watch of the king's house. And a third part shall be at the gate of serve, and a third part at the gate behind the guard. So shall he keep the watch of the house, that it be not broken down.
Two parts of all you that go forth on the Sabbath, even they shall keep the watch of the house of the Lord about the king. And ye shall compass the king round about, every man with his weapons in his hand. And he that cometh within the ranges, let him be slain. And be ye with the king as he goeth out, and as he cometh in. And the captains over the hundreds did according to all things that Jehoiada the priest commanded, and they took every man his men that were to come in on the Sabbath with them, that should go out on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest, and to the captains over hundreds, and the priests give King David spears and shields that were in the temple of the Lord. And the guard stood, every man with his weapon in his hand, round about the king, from the right corner of the temple to the left corner of the temple, along all the altar and the tent. They brought forth his son, and put the crown upon him, and gave him the testimony, and they made him king, and anointed him, and they clapped their hands and said, God save the king.
And having that heard the noise of the Lord and of the people, she came to the people to the temple of the Lord. And she looked, behold, the king stood at a pillow, as the matter was, and the princes and the trumpet about the king, and all the people were on their knees, and looked at his trumpet, and heaven and people praise the prince. But the Lord had the prince named the captain of his hundreds, and officers of the host, said unto him, Have forthwith he reigned, and put that, and he that followed or killed with the stone. For the priest had said, Whether or not this slain in the house of the Lord. And they laid hands upon him, and surely out of the way, out of which the horses came into the king's house, and freed him, and there was she slain.
And Jehovah made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people, between the king also and the people. And all the people of the land went into the house of Bethel and broke it down, his altars and his images broke they in pieces thoroughly, and slew Mentain the priest of Bel before the altars, and the priests appointed officers over the house of the Lord. And he took the rulers over hundreds, and the captains and the guards, and all the people of the land, and they brought down the king from the house of the Lord, and came by the way of the gate of the guard to the king's house, and he sat on the throne of the kings.
And all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was in quiet. And they slew Athaliah with the sword beside the king's house. 7 years old was Joash when he began to reign.
Bill, Larry, go ahead and read 2 more verses in chapter 12.
In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash began to reign. 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Zebediah, and Beersheba. And Joash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all his days, wherein Jehoiada the priest instructed him.
Appreciate that. This if you read through this chapter and look at the things we've been talking about, a lot of people talk about the First and Kings and obviously the Chronicles, documenting the historical facts that happened. There's both records, historical records and biblical records, and they overlap each other. They support each other. One of the things that I read about this chapter was the details that Jehoiada, the priest, he put a lot of time and effort and thoughts into how he was going to take care of the situation. He took a lot of I guess one of the titles I was thinking about in the questions was, "This is another well-planned murder." Are there any things that you can remember already, the different kingdoms, maybe some other kings or some other king's sons that have been killed along the way? There are several. If we think back, that's almost the norm is that somebody would usurp authority over whoever was, the king at that time. There was never peace, it seems. One thing that I was thinking about that would help us, and I thought about Brother John Leonard's brother and the scroll that him and his wife put out and handed out back years ago. But it had the timelines where the divided kingdom split, and it has all the kings on the bottom, the kings on the top of each one of the kingdoms, and it really, when you get one of those, it really helps kind of define why they bounce back and forth so much. As far as when time's going, you've got one kingdom that maybe you've had war for 10 years, and then this may happen within 7 years, maybe within that same 10 years, and it'll bounce back and forth. And it kind of gave me a better understanding of the Kings and Chronicles. But normally, I just kind of zone out when we start reading the names, and it makes it a lot easier for me to follow because you like Jeroboam. There's another Jeroboam, number 2, that comes up later. Joash. Also, you got the Jehoiada, Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat. They're all about the same pronunciation, but they're totally different people that did totally different things. One of the things I thought was interesting was just kind of like the miracles that we talked about on Sunday morning a couple of weeks ago. The detail that Jehoiada and the time he put into thinking about how he was going to have this arranged. When we talked about the end of chapter 10, talked about the Reubenites and the Madianites, and they came over the river Aaron and Aaron and Roshan there in 33. Then right below it, the rest of Jehu they're not found in the book of Chronicles, the Kings, and it's Jehu stuff with his father, and they buried him. And then Jehoiada, his son, reigned in his stead. And the time of Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. And now the very next verse, you jump into the other kingdom. And I think that's a good switch to kind of look at that chart if you remember it, and just kind of keep it in your mind. All this was because the divided kingdom. We talked about Saul and David and Solomon. They each reigned 40 years. As we talked about already today, Joash reigned 40 years also. So he had a longer than normal service, if you will. This is one of the few times that a woman is in charge. We look back at verse 1. Who did Ahaziah's mother destroy? All the royal seed went in and cleaned house, except for one. There was one that got away, if you will. We talked about the bloodiness, I guess, and the murderous attitudes of life then. If they set their mind to it, they would end it in a heartbeat to get themselves in position, to get themselves in a place of power, to get themselves in a place of respect. And why did she do that? Why did she kill all the royal seed? Number 2, because her son was dead. They just saw that he was dead, and she reacted and went to kill all the world see. Went to the obviously into the king's palace and cleaned house, if you will. Jehoiada, Jehoshaphat, says in verse 2, is the one that hid the king's son so that he would not be slain. One of the readings that the cross-referenced on that was because it was, if you look at the her being Haziel's half-sister, Athaliah wouldn't have hesitated to carry her, probably kill her also, just to, if she had known that what she had done, hid Joash, the son of Haziel. But she got away with it for 7 years, or 6 years. She hid. Where was he hid? Number 3. Where was Joash hid during that time? In the bedchamber, in the house of the Lord. And if she was there and reigned, you would have thought that somewhere along the line she would have figured out that he was still there. But they did a real good job hiding him, obviously. Kind of like whenever you think about Jesus and Mary and Joseph also going to Egypt to get away from persecution. They were clearing out all 2 years younger and killing all the babes, looking for Christ. They ran to safety in Egypt and then later returned back. But here, they did a real good job, hiding him and his nurse in the bedchamber, and he was not slain. All the others, obviously, they were slain. Verse 3, who was reigning over the land at that time for those 6 years? The mother, right? Athaliah. So she was reigning for 6 years while he was basically growing, getting big enough to, come out and make an appearance. He was in for 6 years, so if he was born approximately a minute, he was about 7 when he began to reign, based on the other verses we read from the end of the chapter. Who was Jehoiada at this time? Jehoiada was the priest. Obviously, he knew who he was. Joash was the king's son. He also, if you think about the way he ordered things, the way he brought people into this, when he talks about him, he sent and fetched the rulers of over hundreds with the captains and the guard and brought them to the house of the Lord. I think it's interesting that the phrase "the house of the Lord" in this chapter is used 7 or 8 times. That was his headquarters, if you will, and that's where he set out to. His plan was devised to take Joash and make him the king, the proper king. Verse 4, the last phrase there, if you didn't know anything about this, the rest of the chapter, and it says, he made a covenant with them and took an oath of them in the house of the Lord and showed them the king's son. What could have happened then if they had not had the covenant, had the oath, and understood that this was the plan to be executed? If he just brought the child out, being 7 years old, chances are he wouldn't have been accepted as the king. Jehoiada obviously knew how to play the crowd, had them all. If you look at the covenant and the oath. Don't have a lot of details about it, but you can just think of, how important it is that what I'm getting ready to show you, nobody knows. Joash is alive, and he is the rightful heir, not, in this case, to get into the details again, he was the priest. After making a covenant with the rulers and the captains and an oath, he showed them the king's son, Joash. It's interesting that this covenant later on, there's a second covenant, an oath that he does toward the end of the chapter. He got people to basically agree to follow his command, even though he was a priest, not the king. He was in control, and they obviously were ready to follow. The next couple of verses there talk about a third part. He divided of the guard. Where did the first third, where were they sent? First third, verse 6, I believe it is.
Keeper will watch at the king's house.
In the king's house. Again, that's the another use of the phrase we're talking about, in the king's house. So the third were there, and as they entered in on the Sabbath to worship, they basically kept guard, put their, made the defense. Where was the second third? Gate of Sir. And the third part? Behind the guard. And then so you should keep watch of the house, that there be not broken down. He had, obviously, he knew the layout of the king's house. He knew the things that, that were defending. If you think about it. Later on, he talks about from corner to corner, side to side, where it couldn't be broken down. He had it all planned out. And then he goes on what the verse 8 basically tells them what they're supposed to do when they're moving around with the king. Basically, as you go without and come at the end, you're supposed to surround him and protect him. So he had his armed guard. Verse 10. Thought this was kind of interesting. Whose spears and shields were they using? And where did they come from? King David's spears and shields that were in the temple of the Lord. So he basically took King David's equipment that he had and armed this guard to protect Joash. Is this the throne of David? Or is this not the throne of David? I believe it is. This is in Jerusalem. So this is the right kingdom that was in the lineage that would become the cross to come through. And he thought it was proper that they used David's shields and spears. What three things were done to Joash in verses? It was on verse 12 actually. What three things did Jehoiada do to Joash?
Put a crown on him, gave him testimony, and made him king.
That put the crown. That was obviously the symbol of the king. Obviously, the testimony, basically the announcement, and anointing is like in the other cases we have usually an anointing blessing. Being the priest, anointing his head with oil, and signifying that he was the chosen one. The last four words in verse 12, what does that say? God save the king. Have we heard that anywhere in the past 10 years or 10 months? Or in England, now they have a king. It used to be God save the queen. God save the king. I used to work with a guy from England, and I don't know why he was in America, but he loved England. always talk about that it was just different because you had a king, you had a queen, you had the royal family, and it wasn't like over here where people would be elected. And I don't even know where he's at now. I think he's still in Nashville somewhere, but he was the first person I ever knew that really loved soccer. He was very different at the time that I met him. But God Save the King, that was one of the things that he would always, at that time, God Save the Queen, but he'd always say it just to basically show reverence to her and hope that she had a long life. And she did. Let's see, what did the guard do after he was anointed king? What's one of the things that they did in verse 12, right before they said, God save the king?
Clap their hands.
They clapped their hands. You can see that if you had captains over hundreds and you had them divided up into thirds, chances are there were like, I'm guessing, 300 to 400 people in this gathering. They all clapped their hands and said, God save the king. And who hears this noise? Verse 13. Queen. If you think about it, that was she had exalted herself, and she was in the position of reigning over the land. That was it's interesting that she heard the noise and came to see what was going on again in the temple of the Lord. What two things did she cry out? Or what did she cry out? Treason. Why? Why would that be treason? This was the king's son. So was it really treason, or was her actions treason? To me, it was kind of like she was, in a way, whitewashing herself, saying, this is treason, not what I did. And obviously, by seeing all the armed guard, I think she knew her. Said about rent her clothes. Obviously, she was in distress, and they cried out, treason, treason. We look down in the other chapter, or the other verse, rather, down, again, talking about the house of God. Joel had said that they didn't want to kill her in the house of God. Even though they were going to kill her, they took her. Where did they take her? What's one of the phrases they used there? Beside the king's house is one of them, but there's also another phrase where they took her to kill her outside the house of the Lord. Right. So the horses, the way they got in and out of the king's house, obviously a well-trodden pathway, but outside of the house of God, house of the Lord, beside the king's house, and basically in the entryway for the animals, horses. And there they killed her. Nothing said much about it other than she was killed with a sword beside the king's house. What does verse 14 say the people did? Okay. And like I said, that was more noise that Adonai heard. And then again in verse 20, what does it say the people did? They rejoiced also. So they were repeated that the fact that all people land rejoiced, and at this point it ends, and the city was in quiet. In quietness and peace, if you will, different than what probably the 6 years before this had been after the usurping the authority and taking over the throne. . The second covenant that Jehoiada made, where did we pick that up at? Verse 17. The second covenant, it's another reference to the agreement. Who were the three parties in the second covenant, verse 17?
Lord, the King, and the people.
The Lord, the King, and the people. And between that, what was the covenant? What was that supposedly to guarantee that the people would be? The Lord's people, obedient to the Lord, and being the priest, knowing how the covenants and the oaths were working. That was what he desired. That's what he wanted. Then verse 18. After that, after the covenant, what happens to where do the people go? Real simple question. Verse 18.
Into the house of Baal.
And break down his altars and his images and break them to pieces thoroughly. Who was slain? Baal's priest. So they went and cleaned house, knowing that this was not in line with what the Lord would have them to do. So they went and took down the Baal and his altars and his priest. Then they anointed and appointed officers and priests over the house of the Lord. So they were set back on the right path. Verse 19, number 19, if you kept up. Once king, did the guard stay with Joash or did they leave? From one phrase there, and all the people of the land brought down the king from the house of the Lord and came on the way of the gate of the guard of the king's house, and he set them on the throne of the king. So the rulers took the hundreds and the captains and the guard and all the people of the land. So they stayed and protected the king. Continued to take care of the new king. He was 7 years of age. Amazing to me that verse 21, 7 years old was Joash when you begin your reign. Obviously, hopefully, with Jehoiada, the priest, one of the phrases that I think Eric read, it ended up all the days wherein Jehoiada, the priest, instructed. In verse 3, but the high places were not taken away. Let's go ahead and read the next chapter if you want to get us started about that for next week. Let's go ahead and read chapter 12. Again, 21 verses. Someone will start us there and we'll read the next chapter.
In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoshaphat began to reign. For 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Robertson. And Jehoash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all his days when Jehoiada the priest instructed him. The high places were not taken away. People still sacrificed for incense in high places. And Jehoash said to the priests, all the money of the dedicated things that is brought into the house of the Lord, even the money of everyone that has in the account, the money that every man has set out, and all the money that cometh into any man's heart to bring into the house of the Lord. Let the priests take it to them, every man of his clans, and let them renew the breaches of the house, wheresoever any breach shall be found. But it was so that in the 3 year of King Jehoash the priest had not repaired the breaches of the house. Then King Jehoash called for Jehoiada the priest and the other priests and said to them, why repair you not the breaches of the house? Now therefore receive no more money of your acquaintance, but deliver it for the breaches of the house. And the priest consented to receive no more money of the people, even to repair the breaches of the house.
But Jehoiada the priest of Jehoash said more saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up, and they put up in bags and told the money that was found in the house of the Lord. And they gave the money being told into the hands of them that did the work, that had the oversight of the house of the Lord. And they laid it out to the carpenters and builders that wrought upon the house of the Lord, and to the masons and hewers of stone, and to buy timber and hewed stone to repair the breaches of the house of the Lord, and for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. Howbeit there were not made for the house of the Lord bowls of silver, snuffers, basins, trumpets, and any vessels of gold, vessels of silver, of the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. But they gave that to the workmen, and repaired therewith the house of the Lord. Moreover, they reckoned not with the men, into whose hands they delivered the money to be bestowed on workmen, for they dealt faithfully. To trespass money and sin money was not brought into the house of the Lord, it was the priest. Then Hazael, king of Syria, went up and fought against Gath, and took it. And Hazael set his face to go up to Jerusalem, and Jehoash, king of Judah, took all the hallowed things that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah, his fathers, kings of Judah, had dedicated, and his own hallowed things, and all the gold that was found in the treasures of the house of the Lord, and in the king's house, and sent it to Hazael, king of Syria, and went away from Jerusalem. And the rest of the acts of Joash and all that he did, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And his servants arose and made conspiracy, and slew Joash in the house of Milo, which goeth down to Selah, or Josaphar, the son of Shimeon, and Jehozadak, the son of Shomer, his servants put him, and he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amahirah, his son, reigned in his stead.
All right, I appreciate that. I want to go ahead and read some more because that was, if you think about those two chapters, that was the life of the king here in 2 Kings. I thought it was interesting. We skipped through there and kind of looked down through some of the key things. He reigned for 40 years. The main thing there, as we walk through here, but the high places were not taken away. What were the high places that they still went and sacrificed and burned incense in? Were these truly holy places, or were they
Worship.
So that was going back, if we think back, all the when a lot of the kings went in and destroyed the high places and destroyed all the groves and things, they were earthly, they were idolatrous, and they were not what God would have us to believe in and follow. Do we have any people that we know of today that worship things that are like nature, earth, different things? I know a few kind of out there a little bit, but there's still some people that think the creation is holy and should be worshipped. The burning of incense in high places, obviously we know that's if it continues, it would be against God's will. And it talks about the money. In 23 years after he began to reign, what had not been repaired? The breaches of the house. That he had set out to get these fixed, and 23 years later, it was still not done.
I'm going to say most people believe in nature and
kind of a misconstrued description, especially. Mother Nature, Father Time, different in this society that we're living in. Not telling where they could end up in a couple of years from now. It just amazes me some of the things that are being said now, and some of the things that 20 years ago you never would have heard or thought about. But some of the strangest things that are coming out are some of the simplest things, and they're going directly against them. So at this time, going back to the high places and worship gods, the house of Bel, they destroyed it, but he comes back around later. So they bring him back out, start worshiping again. So it's like we talked about before, like the cycles of the Israelites, the divided kingdoms, which were good, which were evil rulers, and we're talking about Jerusalem being the southern kingdom. Another thing that kind of got me thinking about this was when we talked about the captivity, the Babylonian captivity. Was that for both the north and south kingdom, or just for one kingdom? Not much of a trick question, because the Assyrian was the others that came in and also took away the northern kingdom. I don't guess I really had it settled in my mind that was two separate events. Like the Babylonians, they came in, attacked Jerusalem, and carried out the enslaved Israelites from Jerusalem, carried them away into Babylonian captivity about 605 BC, and then they came back and destroyed Jerusalem completely in about 586 BC. So about 14 or 15 years later, they came back. Israel, on the other hand, the northern two tribes, they were led away or taken by the Assyrian army in 722 BC. So different times, the ends of their reigns, different kings. And again, if you think about the timeline where they were overlapping, that'll help you kind of get a picture of what was going on. One of the phrases that one of the commentators that I read was talking about these chapters was the northern tribes was the beginning of God dealing with the Gentile nations, the non-Jewish people, using them to manipulate and change actually God's people and to make them get back in line. Any thoughts or comments about this chapter 11 and 12 we just read? They're appreciated. Again, I was kind of stuck in the middle, didn't really have enough for the whole hour, but if I went to two chapters, we would have too much for the hour. So I appreciate you being here and your comments, and we'll turn it over to Chairman back in. Thank you again for being here.
I'm going to turn in your songbooks. We'll sing song number 23. invitation here. So, I've been thinking a lot about, obviously, the Kings. We've been talking about it a lot, and reading, the Bible, different books, and trying to get my mind wrapped around it a lot lately. And then, along with that, I started a lesson on prayer. Most of you were there on Sunday morning, based on Psalms, and it was. I read something that was kind of shocking to me that I'm not sure that we all take notice of. But the lesson or the invitation tonight is be careful what you first said wish for because you might get it. It's actually be careful what you pray for because you might get it. It's kind of a weird thought that I came across when I was reading Samuel. 1 Samuel 8, it says in verses 4 through 7, it reads, Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us all, to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people, in all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. So we know what God did. He set up judges over Israel. And then they said, Well, Samuel, you're a great man. We're fine with you reigning over us, but we want a king after you. And it was shocking to me. They begged for a king. And not only, then God said, okay, so tell them what they're going to get. Tell them how it's going to be when they get their king that they want so badly. Because they want to be like everybody else. So Samuel went back and he said, hey, this is what you get. If you want a king, then you'll get your daughters taken and your sons taken, and they'll be in the service of the king, and you won't like it. And he gave them all these things, all these reasons to not put a king in place. And they still said, yep, that's what we want. Basically that's what they said. This is the Israelites' prayer. Their prayer is that they get a king so they can be like the world. When God set them apart from the world as a nation, they're praying for, can you please make us more like the world? And I've thought about myself. I think maybe that's what I do a lot of times, or was doing a lot of times in the past. Like, if I could just make more money, just give me enough, like one more step in this ladder I'm climbing to get to the money that I need. One more, that'll be the time that I'll be able to work for you and work hard and do all the things you want me to. It was never that time. It never came to that time. As long as that was my goal, that ended up being my prayer, even though I didn't pray it, even though I didn't say, hey, just give me money. I did say it in some ways, but it was about me. It was about where my heart was intended. My heart was intended to be toward the things that I wanted. And if God could just make it that the things I wanted were the same things that I needed to follow Him, then we'd be okay. And that wasn't the way it was going to be, obviously. So, money's just one thing. It's not all the things. I mean, this was a king. This was kind of out there, We I don't think any of us would ask for a king. We might ask for money, or we might ask for something else, or we might pursue something else. So it becomes our prayer because it's what we pursue, and we pursue it so much so that God will let you have it. God will let you get something that you shouldn't have, just like He let Israel do it. So I've heard all my life, I heard the saying, God won't let you, He won't give you something if He doesn't think you should have it. Yes, He will. He'll give you something if He doesn't think you should have it. He gave you the ability to work hard and make money. If that's your goal, He gave you all that stuff to be able to accomplish that goal. So if you put enough effort into it and make it your prayer, then you get to that goal, and then that goal becomes your worship, and your worship is outside of where it needs to be. So I've just been thinking about that a lot, and just thought, there's a lot of illustrations we could use, but I would say just remember, if you ask God for something and you work hard on that goal, then you might just get it, whether God has intervened or not. And anything worldly you receive can be a curse and not a blessing. So make sure that that goal, if it's worldly, is focused on the spiritual. So if money is where, your service is, if you can make a lot of money and put that towards God's service, then that would be great. Or whatever, your time, your energy. If your energy is toward the spiritual, then you're in the right place. But if it's not, I hope and pray that everyone can continue to focus on God and His will under His righteousness. But if you find yourself in a position where you've stepped away from God, or you find yourself needing the prayers of the church, we're here now to help you. And if you need to obey the gospel and begin down this path, I hope you'll come as you stand and sing. All things are ready. Come to the feast. Come, for the table now is spread. Ye famishing, ye weary, come, and thou shalt be richly fed. Hear the invitation, come whosoever will. Praise God for full salvation, for whosoever will. All things are ready. Come to the feast. Leave every care and worldly strife. Come feast upon the love of God and drink everlasting life. Hear the invitation, come whosoever will. Praise God for full salvation, for whosoever will.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the time we can come together and meet and have a Bible study. Please be with the sick that are mentioned often, help them to get well, and be with our elderly and our shut-ins, and help us live every day as we should. In Christ's name, amen.